So for GNI's case study, we are examining how a religious discrimination lawsuit case is dealt with in a professional sports organization on both the human resource side and the public relations side. In this case, our organization is the Cleveland Browns organization, and a Muslim employee has filed a lawsuit as he has felt that he was wrongfully withheld from the promotion process. And he feels this way because he has been with the organization longer than any of the other interviewees, and he also has the qualifications necessary to be promoted for the job. And it's also important to note that a diversity statement is in place within the Browns organization here, which would make the employee know where they stand on their diversity inclusion within the organization. However, in this case too, the employee states that he does not know all the parts of the diversity statement. And so this word eventually leaks to the public, even though it's normally meant to stay within the organization, and therefore the Browns' image is damaged as a result. So we'll be examining the human resource side of this as well as the public relations side of this. And on my end, I am examining the human resource side. And really, human resource professionals, they deal with the issues within the team and the organization that employees might be having or employers might be having. So therefore, the employee can communicate with the HRP the problems that he or she is having within the workplace in regards to religious discrimination, and the employer can really deliver his message to the organization as well on where he or she stands on diversity within the workplace. So really, the human resource professional's job is to basically serve as a pipeline for employees and employers to communicate with each other despite not being face-to-face. And it's important to note that certain laws have been put in place in order to combat these religious discrimination issues within the workplace. For one, the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 clearly states that organizations must reasonably accommodate an employee's sincerely held religious beliefs, observances, and practices when provisions of such an accommodation would not impose any undue hardship on the employer. So therefore, what this is saying is the organization must accommodate a person's religious beliefs if it's not really perceiving an immediate danger within the organization. So if the religion does seem dangerous to the organization, if it provides any dangers, which really it never, most of the time does not, then the organization doesn't necessarily have to accommodate that religion. But in this case, the Muslim employee has not really provided any danger to the organization just by following his religious beliefs. So therefore, he needs to be accommodated in this case. Another rule to take into account has to do strictly with the National Football League. And in the NFL, there's a rule called the Rooney Rule. And the Rooney Rule ensures that minority candidates from different religious or ethnic backgrounds that can be viewed as a minority can be considered and must be considered in the hiring or promoting processes and receive an interview. Now, unfortunately, this does not make sure that a minority is hired in this situation. However, it assures that they are at least considered for the position. In most cases, the majority race or ethnicity, or in this case, the majority religion, ends up getting the position most of the time. So therefore, this rule has been criticized at times as really it does promote inclusion. However, it doesn't necessarily ensure inclusion. So HRPs must know these laws in order to enforce them. They need to make sure that employers are aware of these laws as well as employees within the workplace. And as I noted, the Cleveland Browns organization in this case does have a diversity statement in place. And a diversity statement usually just states how the organization plans on promoting diversity. And it also shows different ways that they would combat legal issues within the workplace if discrimination was the case in the organization. So really, it is important that HRPs ensure that employees know this statement so that the employees know what they're dealing with when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And it's also important to note that diversity statements may need to change sometimes in order to better accommodate employees as time goes on. Diversity is not always going to remain the same, so therefore, when diversity changes, so does the statement. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, human resource professionals, they must communicate all changes to employees, and that's definitely the case with a diversity statement. Employees need to know what is going on in the workplace, and that's why it's the human resource professional's job to do so. They must receive input on what is working in the workplace and what's not working in the workplace. That way, they can better accommodate the needs of their employees, and they can let their employers know what needs to be done in order to change these issues. And this would require them to openly listen to the employees as well as their employers so they can make the necessary changes to avoid situations like this from occurring. And finally, the effects on the workplace can prove to be very catastrophic. So studies by human resource professionals show that when a religion is tolerated and promoted, more meaningful work is done within the workplace. So basically, people feel more comfortable and they really want to come to work, and they are more productive when doing their work if they feel like their religion is being tolerated and promoted within the workplace. Doesn't necessarily mean that the employer has to agree with their religious practices, just as long as they show respect. That makes the workers feel much more comfortable within the workspace. And when it's not promoted, research shows that a negative atmosphere can be created and less meaningful work is done. There's definitely more tense situations within the workplace, and people feel less comfortable to come to work. So that's why it's important for human resource professionals to really come into the workplace and really make sure that employees know how to combat these religious discrimination cases, as well as employers knowing how to combat these religious discrimination cases. And it's also important to note that if this case goes on for too long, the workplace can really negatively be impacted, and therefore, as a whole, work will not be done as productive as it should be. And now I'm going to pass it on to Gia, who will go with the PR side of the sports organization.
Word about this religious discrimination that has happened within the organization has now spread out to the media. Coming from an organization that embraces diversity and difference, this is leaving people with a lot of questions on the organization and how welcoming it is to new people and people of different beliefs and cultures. People have a lot of questions for the organization and for the people that have been affected by this discrimination. People are also speculating and are very curious to why this has happened and what the truth is about the organization. From an organization that embraces diversity, they wonder that although there is diversity, is there also inclusiveness as well? What is this organization going to do about this? Is there going to be change happening? A lot of questions are being asked. The PR practitioner within the organization has to address this issue to the media before further speculation is committed. The PR practitioner addresses this problem and explains that this behavior and discrimination will not be permitted, and there's a lot of action going into this issue to stop and prevent future issues like this happening within the organization in the future. This issue within the organization comes from the power of the organization. The people that are within this organization do not have enough power to stop or prevent this from happening. Obviously, the power within the organization has not put enough rules and regulations into stopping this kind of behavior between their employees. So this issue must be addressed from the power and taught and worked its way down in order to prevent it. This kind of behavior is also against PRSA Code of Ethics, which is a code that is implemented within PR work to make sure that people are well respected, that correct info is being displayed to the different publics and stuff like that. So by disrespecting an employee and having disrespect within the organization is against the code of ethics that is well known throughout all works of PR. Code of ethics also kind of goes within life in general. We all carry our own code of ethics, and that's why creating like a better understanding of religious diversity and interfaith is important by understanding other people and making people feel included. By having this issue, and especially by having this issue being shown and leaked out to public and the fans and all kinds of different organizations outside of our own, it has put our own organization at risk. The way people see our organization is very important, and by them seeing it in this negative way has created different ideas and opinions in other people's heads, and the way that people think of our organization may be a little different now because our organization was put at risk. You cannot afford to have your organization put at risk, and that is why by originally creating this kind of atmosphere and accepting in an inclusive atmosphere would have avoided this issue, because people would have already had that kind of understanding and inclusiveness attitude, and this would not have happened. Now that this issue has happened, our organization is at risk, and you just cannot afford that. We needed to embrace this diversity by also prioritizing inclusiveness to avoid this issue. Inclusiveness is very important, and it is also very different from diversity. You can have a diverse group of people without being inclusive. By being aware of people's diversity and how different they are from you or other people, and accepting that they're that way and understanding and being willing to work with them because they are that way is very different. And that is why inclusiveness is important, because it includes those people. There's no reason why they should be treated differently. That is why you must understand interfaith and how it is important within organizations like this. When issues like this leak out to the media, it causes way too much speculation, which could spread obviously to fans, to sponsors of our organization, to other organizations that work with us. It causes way too much speculation. And you have to keep a positive image to keep a positive environment and atmosphere within your organization. And by keeping this positive image, you also stay on the path of being successful. You cannot risk putting your organization at risk and risk that success by allowing something like this to happen. Interfaith diversity and inclusion is super important in maintaining a positive atmosphere and keeping your organization on track to stay successful. As you can see, this issue of religious discrimination within your organization can be very challenging and messy. Outside of just the public relations and human resources departments, it can also affect many of the other departments within your organization and ultimately can put your organization at risk. By practicing effective listening, that can lead to understanding inclusion and diversity within your organization and gaining that understanding and respect by also preventing the conflict that could happen in the future.
So now, we ask you as a class, how do you feel one should combat these issues within the workplace? What can be put in place within the organization to avoid this type of conflict in the future? And do you think the relationship between the employee and organization can be repaired?